My name is Natalie. I am 33 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my mother watched my sister steal my life savings and kick me out. My sister smirked, telling me she could do whatever she wanted. I did not scream. I packed my bags and left silently. They thought they had won completely, forgetting that I am a forensic accountant who tracks federal fraud for a living. When I returned 3 weeks later, my sister laughed in my face, right up until the FBI kicked the front doors off the hinges. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members. It was a Tuesday evening in Chicago. The wind was howling outside our townhouse, but the real storm was happening inside our dining room. I walked in and slammed a freshly printed bank statement directly onto the mahogany dining table. The paper slid across the smooth surface and stopped right next to a bright orange designer box. Sitting at the head of the table was my younger sister, Brittany. She was 30 years old, the undisputed golden child of our family, and currently distracted by pulling a luxury Birkin bag out of its pristine dust cover. Sitting next to her was her husband, DeAndre. He was a commercial real estate agent who cared more about his image than his actual sales. He was holding his wrist up to the chandelier light, admiring the sparkle of a brand new diamond Rolex. My mother, Patricia, was lounging on the sofa nearby, sipping an expensive glass of Cabernet wine. She looked perfectly content, basking in the glow of her successful daughter and son-in-law. "Where is my money?" I asked. My voice was flat. Brittany paused her unboxing, not making eye contact. "What money, Natalie? Stop being so dramatic. We are having a celebration tonight." I tapped my index finger against the bank statement. $140,000. Every single penny I have saved over the last 3 years for a down payment on my own house. It was sitting in the legacy joint account I opened with Mom back when I was in college. As of this morning, the balance is exactly zero. My mother sighed heavily and set her wine glass down with an annoyed clink. She looked at me like I was an unruly child interrupting an important adult meeting. "Natalie, please lower your voice," my mother said. "Your sister and DeAndre just closed a massive deal. They needed some liquid capital immediately to secure a commercial building. It is a family investment." "A family investment?" I repeated, staring at the woman who was supposed to protect me. "You let them transfer my life savings without asking me. That account was meant to be transitioned to my sole name years ago. You were only on it because the bank required a co-signer when I was 19. Brittany finally looked up from her luxury handbag, rolling her eyes. "Oh, get over it, Natalie. You are 33 years old, single, and you spend all your time looking at spreadsheets. It is not like you need a big house right now anyway. DeAndre and I are building an empire. We needed the cash to prove our liquidity to the sellers. We will pay you back eventually." Eventually. The word hung in the air, dripping with arrogance. DeAndre chuckled, adjusting the heavy gold band of his new watch. "Look at it this way, sis. You are practically an angel investor in our new venture. Real estate is all about leverage. You have to spend money to make money. Once this property starts generating rental income, we will toss you your little savings back with interest. You should be thanking us for putting your lazy money to work." I stared at him. My money was not lazy. It was the result of working 60-hour weeks, auditing fraudulent companies, skipping vacations, and living frugally so I could finally buy my own home. And now the money was gone, transformed into designer leather goods, diamond watches, and some mysterious real estate venture they were bragging about. "I am a forensic accountant, DeAndre," I said, keeping my emotions entirely locked down. "I look at financial crimes all day long. You do not just take $140,000 from an account that does not belong to you. That is called wire fraud." Brittany slammed her hands on the table. "Do not you dare use those words in this house. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous of me. Just because no man wants you and you have no life outside of your boring office job does not mean you get to ruin our success. Mom gave us permission to use the family funds. It is not family funds," I fired back. "It is my salary, my bonuses, my money. Mom did not contribute a single dollar to that account in over a decade. My mother stood up, crossing her arms defensively. Family money is family money, Natalie. You have a good job. You can just save up again. Brittany and DeAndre are on the verge of becoming the social elite of this city. They needed to look the part. Do you know how important image is in commercial real estate? That bag and that watch are business expenses. They show potential clients that DeAndre is highly successful. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. So my down payment bought a purse and a watch to fake a lifestyle you cannot actually afford. DeAndre stood up, his towering frame meant to intimidate me. Watch your mouth, Natalie. We are doing big things. You sit in a cubicle. You do not understand high-level business. I understand theft, I replied instantly. I understand that if the money is not back in my account by 9 tomorrow morning, I am walking into the bank branch and reporting unauthorized fraudulent transfers. I will file a police report for grand larceny. The room went dead silent. The arrogant smiles vanished. For a second, I saw genuine panic flash in my sister's eyes. But then, as always, her narcissism took over. She looked at our mother, expecting her to fix it, expecting her to protect the golden child at all costs. And as always, my mother did exactly that, setting the stage for the absolute worst betrayal of my entire life. My mother took a slow, deliberate step between me and my sister. She raised her chin, adopting the exact same condescending tone she used whenever I brought home an A- instead of an A+ in high school. You are not calling the police, Patricia said. And you are certainly not reporting anything to the bank. My name is on that account, Natalie. I am a joint owner. I have the legal authority to authorize any transfer I see fit. I stared at her. The cold reality of her words washed over me. Legally, the bank would see 2 authorized signers. She knew that. She had weaponized a technicality from a decade ago to rob her own daughter. You authorized them to wipe out my entire life savings, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. It is family money, she replied without a single ounce of shame. You are my daughter. Brittany is my daughter. We operate as a unit. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. Brittany and DeAndre have an opportunity that comes around maybe once in a lifetime. They are closing on a multi-million-dollar commercial plaza downtown. A property that will elevate this entire family. Elevate the family, I repeated. By buying a purse and a watch. Those are optics, Patricia snapped. In the high-stakes real estate world, you have to project wealth to attract wealth. DeAndre is meeting with elite investors. He cannot walk into a boardroom looking like a middle-class amateur. They needed liquid cash to show proof of funds and to polish their professional image. It was a strategic decision. I looked at Brittany. She was back to admiring her new leather bag, gently stroking the handles as if my tears and sweat had not paid for it. And what about my house, I asked. I was pre-approved for a mortgage yesterday. I was supposed to put the down payment on a place next week. My mother rolled her eyes and let out a harsh sigh. Natalie, let us be completely honest with ourselves here. You are 33 years old and you are single. You have no husband and no prospects of having children anytime soon. What on earth do you need a house for? The cruelty of her words hit me exactly as she intended. She knew my insecurities, and she knew exactly how to twist the knife. You sit in an office all day, tracking spreadsheets. Patricia continued, her tone dripping with disdain. You come home, you read a book, and you go to sleep? A small apartment is perfectly fine for your lifestyle. Brittany is building a brand. She needs a sprawling property to host galas, to entertain high-net-worth clients, and to raise my future grandchildren in a neighborhood that reflects our status. She actually needs the space. You just want it for your ego. So my money belongs to her because she is prettier and married, I stated, summarizing her twisted logic. DeAndre stepped forward, holding his hands up in a placating gesture that felt entirely rehearsed. He flashed a brilliant salesman smile completely devoid of genuine warmth. Natalie, we need to look at the macro picture here, DeAndre said, using the corporate buzzwords he clearly practiced in front of a mirror. We are talking about synergistic growth, Right now, your money was just sitting in a low-yield savings account, getting eaten alive by inflation. It was stagnant capital. What Brittany and I did was pivot those assets into a high-yield growth vehicle. We are leveraging this capital to secure a prime commercial asset. You stole it, I corrected him. Do not dress up grand larceny in a suit and tie. We reallocated it, DeAndre corrected smoothly, completely unfazed. In business, you have to be agile. We needed the liquidity to bypass the traditional underwriting bottlenecks. Once the commercial plaza starts generating passive income streams, we are going to make you whole. I promise you that. Think of it as an involuntary family investment. When our venture goes public, or we flip the property for double the valuation, I will cut you a check with 10% interest. You will make more money off us than you ever would have in that basic bank account. He spoke with such absolute arrogance, treating my stolen savings like a venture capital seed fund that I was supposed to be grateful for. I am a forensic accountant, DeAndre, I said, my tone dropping to an icy register. Do not try to pitch me your garbage real estate jargon. You do not bypass underwriting bottlenecks with a Birkin bag. Proof of funds requires a bank letter showing reserved capital, not a receipt from a luxury boutique. If you are buying commercial real estate, you need a clean paper trail for the escrow account. The fact that you instantly spent my money on depreciating consumer goods tells me you do not have a commercial plaza lined up at all. You just wanted to look rich. DeAndre's smile vanished. His jaw clenched and he took a step toward me. His towering frame was meant to intimidate me, but I did not back down an inch. You do not know what you are talking about, he sneered, dropping the corporate facade. You crunch numbers for other people who actually take risks. You are a spectator, Natalie. We are the players. We are building generational wealth, and you are crying over a down payment. Brittany stood up, crossing her arms and glaring at me. DeAndre is right. You are so short-sighted. Mom gave us the green light because she actually believes in us. She knows we are going places. All you do is drag everyone down with your negativity. You should be proud to support my cosmetic brand and DeAndre's real estate firm. Instead, you are threatening us. I turned my gaze from my sister back to my mother. The woman who had given birth to me was standing tall, radiating pride for the two thieves standing next to her. She had chosen her side. She had actively facilitated the theft of my future to fund her favorite child's vanity project. I am giving you all one last chance. I said, my voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a rage so deep it felt cold. Put the money back, return the bag, return the watch, and wire the funds back to my account by tomorrow morning. If you do that, I will walk away, and we never have to speak again. Patricia let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed off the high ceilings of the dining room. She walked over to Brittany and placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Nobody is returning anything, Patricia declared with absolute finality. The money is already spent and allocated. It is tied up in contracts and business expenses. You are not going to ruin your sister's moment just because you are bitter about your own lackluster life. You need to stop this tantrum, grow up, and accept that family requires sacrifice. I looked at the three of them standing together, a unified front of narcissism and greed. They truly believed they were untouchable. They thought because my mother's name was technically on that old student account, they had found the perfect legal loophole to rob me blind without consequences. They thought I was just the quiet, boring sister who would eventually back down to keep the peace. They did not realize that by daring me to look into their finances, they had just invited a predator into their own house. I was not going to throw a tantrum. I was going to dismantle their entire lives dollar by stolen dollar. I kept my expression entirely neutral. I did not raise my voice, and I did not let a single tear form in my eyes. I looked directly at my mother, then shifted my gaze to Brittany. Your delusions of grandeur do not change the law, I said with absolute clarity. I am not accepting this. I am not playing the role of the quiet, sacrificial sister so you can pretend to be a mogul. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock, I am walking through the front doors of the Chase Bank branch on Michigan Avenue. I watched DeAndre shift uncomfortably on his feet. I am going to sit down with the branch manager. I continued, outlining every step with professional precision. I will bring my identification, my employment records, and my historical deposit receipts. I will formally report an unauthorized wire transfer of $140,000. I will fill out an affidavit of forgery and fraud. The bank's fraud department will immediately freeze the receiving accounts. That means whatever shell company or fake escrow account you dumped my money into will be locked by federal banking regulators before you even wake up. You will not be able to spend a single dime, and the sellers of your imaginary commercial property will see that your funds are tied up in a criminal investigation. Brittany's smug expression evaporated instantly. The reality of a frozen bank account penetrated her thick layer of arrogance. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red, and the veins in her neck strained against her skin. The pristine Birkin bag slipped from her lap and tumbled onto the hardwood floor, entirely forgotten. "Are you out of your mind?" Brittany shrieked. Her voice echoed sharply off the walls, cracking with pure, narcissistic rage. "You would actually call the bank on your own blood. You would sabotage my entire career over a stupid down payment. You selfish, miserable loser." She stepped around the table, pointing a manicured finger inches from my face. "I am the one building a legacy here. I am the one putting this family on the map. You have always tried to tear me down because you are bitter. You have no friends, no husband, and no life. Mom gave me the money. It was her money to give, and you are just trying to ruin my success." I did not flinch. "It was my money," I said flatly. "And you are going to federal prison if you do not give it back." That was the breaking point. Brittany lunged forward, but DeAndre caught her arm, pulling her back to keep her from getting physical. He stood beside her, puffing out his chest, trying to use his height to force me to step back. I stood my ground, staring straight through them. "You need to pack your things right now," Brittany screamed, her eyes wide with manic fury. "You are not sleeping in this house tonight. You are not sleeping here ever again." I glanced around the townhouse. "I pay half the property tax and all the utility bills for this place," I reminded them. "You do not have the legal right to kick me out." Brittany let out a wicked, breathless laugh. "Oh, really? Tell her, Mom. Tell her whose name is on the deed to this house." I looked toward my mother. Patricia was swirling the dark red wine in her glass, her posture rigid and unyielding. "The house is in my name, Natalie," Patricia said, her tone completely devoid of maternal warmth. "It is my property. Earlier today, I signed a power of attorney granting Brittany full administrative control over the estate. She and DeAndre are taking over the property management as part of their new real estate portfolio." Brittany smirked. "You heard her." Brittany spat. "I am in charge of this property now. And as the property manager, I am officially evicting you. You are a toxic presence in this family. Get out of my house right this second." The townhouse, the place I had called home for 5 years, was suddenly enemy territory. I had subsidized my mother's lifestyle while saving for my own future, and she had secretly handed the keys to the person who just robbed me blind. I looked at my mother one last time, waiting for a shred of decency, a hint of hesitation, or even a flicker of guilt. I wanted to see if the woman who raised me had any limit to her favoritism. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but firm. "It is freezing outside. It is raining and pitch dark. You are really going to let her throw me onto the street after you let her steal everything I own?" Patricia did not meet my gaze. She deliberately turned her back to me, took a slow sip of her wine, walked over to the bay window, and stared out at the streetlights, completely shutting me out of her reality. "She brought this on herself, Brittany," Patricia murmured to the glass. "Do what you have to do. I am giving you 15 minutes to pack whatever fits in your little car." Brittany ordered, her voice dripping with triumphant venom. "After that, DeAndre is throwing your stuff out onto the sidewalk, and I am changing the locks. If you try to come back, I will call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing. And if you go to that bank tomorrow, I swear to God I will make your life a living hell." DeAndre crossed his arms, flashing his diamond watch again. 15 minutes, Natalie. Clock is ticking. Better start moving before things get ugly." I looked at the three of them. Brittany hyperventilating with toxic victory, DeAndre playing the role of the wealthy enforcer, and my mother a silent, cowardly silhouette against the window. They expected me to break down. They wanted me to beg to cry to apologize and pledge my loyalty to their twisted family dynamic. They wanted me to submit to their control. I did none of those things. I simply nodded, turning on my heel and walking up the stairs to my bedroom. I did not slam the door. I did not throw things. I operated with the chilling, calculated precision of someone who knew exactly how a war was won. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door with a quiet click. The silence of my room was a stark contrast to the venomous energy downstairs. I had 15 minutes and I intended to use exactly 14 of them. I pulled my largest suitcase from the closet and laid it flat on the bed. I did not waste time crying over photo albums or sentimental trinkets my mother had given me. They held no value anymore. Instead, I packed with the efficiency of a soldier preparing for deployment. I packed my professional suits, my comfortable shoes, my winter coat, and the secure external hard drives that held years of my personal and professional life. I moved through the room systematically, stripping it of anything that truly mattered to me. My passport, my birth certificate, my tax returns, and my laptop. Every essential document went into a waterproof protective sleeve. I left behind the decorative pillows, the books, and the framed pictures. Let Brittany have them. Let her reign over the meaningless clutter. My entire life, the part that actually mattered, fit neatly into one suitcase and a heavy leather tote bag. I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound loud in the quiet room. I took one last look at the four walls that had housed me while I subsidized that selfish woman. I felt no attachment. The betrayal had severed any emotional ties I had to this space. It was just drywall and paint now. I checked my watch. 13 minutes had passed. I grabbed the handles of my bags and headed for the stairs. As I descended, the sound of laughter and clinking glass drifted up from the dining room. They were not just moving on from throwing me out. They were actively celebrating it. I reached the bottom landing and paused, observing them from the hallway shadow. DeAndre had just popped a bottle of expensive champagne, the cork flying across the room to a chorus of cheers from my mother and sister. Brittany was holding out crystal flutes, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of stolen money and unchecked power. They were toasting to their new empire, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just lit a match inside a powder keg. I stepped into the light of the entryway. None of them offered a word of apology. None of them showed a single ounce of remorse. My mother did not even look my way, her attention entirely focused on the golden bubbles rising in her glass. Brittany threw a smug, victorious glance over her shoulder, her lips curled into a nasty smirk as she watched me struggle with the heavy front door. "Have a nice life, Natalie," Brittany called out, raising her glass in a mocking salute. I did not respond. I pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped out into the freezing Chicago rain. The door clicked shut behind me, severing me from the only family I had ever known. The rain was coming down in icy sheets, soaking through my wool coat in seconds. I loaded my bags into the trunk of my practical sedan, ignoring the sleek new Porsche parked arrogantly in my driveway. I got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and turned the heater on full blast. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white as the adrenaline began to fade, leaving a hollow, aching void in my chest. I drove away from the townhouse without looking back in the rearview mirror. The city streets were slick with rain, reflecting the neon lights of downtown Chicago. I navigated through the familiar roads, my mind operating on autopilot while my heart processed the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I drove for 20 minutes until I found a mid-range business hotel near the financial district. It was clean, anonymous, and secure, exactly what I needed. I parked in the attached garage, pulled my luggage from the trunk, and walked into the brightly lit lobby. The night clerk checked me in with a polite, tired smile, handing me a pair of electronic keycards. I took the elevator to the 7th floor and found my room. It was a standard corporate suite featuring a large king-sized bed, a small sitting area, and a sturdy desk facing a large window. I dropped my bags near the closet and walked over to the window, staring out at the sprawling, rain-soaked skyline. The grief tried to push its way up my throat. A heavy, suffocating wave of sorrow for the mother I had lost, and the sister who had turned into a monster. But I refused to let it consume me. Grief was useless right now. Grief would not get my stolen money back. I forced the raw sorrow down into a tight, dark box and locked it away. In its place rose something entirely different. Pure, calculated, absolute focus. I walked over to my tote bag, pulled out my laptop, and set it squarely on the desk. I plugged it in, opened the screen, and waited for the familiar glow of the startup sequence. I immediately connected to my secure encrypted mobile hotspot, bypassing the public hotel network entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a fraction of a second before I began to type. I bypassed standard consumer banking portals. I logged directly into the secure financial databases and forensic tracking tools I used every single day to hunt down corporate embezzlers and tax evaders. The screen filled with complex search queries, routing numbers, and shell company registries. My toxic family thought they had finally broken me. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought kicking me out into the rain was the ultimate victory. But as I watched the data streams begin to populate across my screen, a cold, genuine smile touched my lips. They forgot what I do for a living. I do not throw tantrums. I trace dirty money. The first step was pulling the raw transaction data from the joint account. I navigated through the banking portal, my eyes scanning the ledger until I found the exact moment my life savings vanished. An outgoing wire transfer executed at 10 in the morning authorized by Patricia's digital signature. The routing number attached to the receiving institution was standard, but the account number was what I needed. I fed that specific string of digits into a financial tracking software I utilized for corporate audits. My mother and sister thought money just disappeared into the ether once it left an account. They did not realize that every digital dollar leaves a footprint, a permanent electronic trail that cannot be erased. The query loaded, and the results populated on my screen in stark white text against a black background. The $140,000 did not go into a personal checking account. It bypassed traditional retail banking entirely. The funds were wired directly into a commercial holding account. I toggled over to the state corporate registry database. If you know where to look, public records are a goldmine of catastrophic secrets. I ran a reverse search on the commercial routing data and cross-referenced it with recent business filings in Illinois. Within seconds, a newly formed entity popped up, Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. The company had been registered exactly 4 days ago. Just enough time to establish a corporate bank account and prepare to receive a massive influx of stolen cash. I pulled the articles of organization. The registered agent address was a cheap virtual mailbox service downtown, a classic tactic used to obscure actual physical locations. But the sole managing member listed on the operating agreement was not hidden at all. The name staring back at me was DeAndre. There was no mention of Brittany. There was no mention of my mother. DeAndre had structured the company so that he retained absolute legal control over every single asset within it. He had essentially tricked my mother into handing over my money directly into his sole possession. It was a bold, arrogant move completely consistent with his character. But establishing a shell company was only the surface layer of this financial crime. I needed to know why they needed the money so urgently. DeAndre had bragged about closing a massive commercial real estate deal, claiming the cash was necessary to prove liquidity to elite investors. My instincts told me that was a complete fabrication. I opened another tab and accessed the county civil court record system. I typed in DeAndre's full legal name and hit search. The results cascaded down my screen, and I let out a sharp, cynical breath. There was no real estate empire. There was no elite network of high net worth clients. There was only a devastating mountain of unmitigated financial disaster. DeAndre was drowning. The public records painted a horrifying picture of a man living entirely on leveraged debt and empty promises. I found 3 separate civil judgments against him in the last 2 years alone. I kept digging, pulling property tax records and credit lien filings. His supposed luxury lifestyle was a carefully constructed house of cards. The Porsche sitting in my mother's driveway was leased, and the financing company had already filed a preliminary notice of default for missed payments. His corporate credit cards were entirely maxed out, carrying balances that would cripple a legitimate business. He had taken out multiple high-interest predatory loans, the kind of aggressive lending options you only pursue when traditional banks refuse to look at you. But the most damning evidence was the pending litigation. I opened a freshly filed civil complaint dated just 2 weeks ago. A group of independent investors was suing DeAndre for breach of contract and fiduciary negligence. They alleged he had misappropriated earnest money deposits from a failed commercial property deal. The plaintiffs were demanding immediate restitution, and they were preparing to pierce his corporate veil to seize his personal assets. I read through the legal filings, the cold, hard facts, aligning perfectly with the timeline of my stolen savings. The $140,000 was never meant to secure a multi-million-dollar commercial plaza. It was not a strategic investment to elevate the family legacy. It was a desperate, panicked bailout. DeAndre needed a massive injection of liquid cash to pay off angry investors before they dragged him into criminal court for his previous fraudulent activities. He had targeted my savings account because it was the easiest, softest mark available. He had used my sister's narcissistic entitlement and my mother's blind favoritism to orchestrate the perfect heist. They stole from me to plug the sinking ship of his pathetic career, and the most pathetic part was how they had spent a portion of my stolen money immediately. The $25,000 Birkin bag and the diamond Rolex watch were not just vanity purchases. They were desperate attempts to maintain the illusion of success while their reality crumbled around them. They were bleeding out financially, yet they still prioritized status symbols over stability. I leaned back in my hotel chair, the glow of the laptop screen casting long shadows across the dark room. The initial shock of the betrayal had completely evaporated, replaced by a crystalline understanding of the battlefield. They were not criminal masterminds, they were just arrogant fools, leaving a trail of easily discoverable evidence in their wake. I closed the court records and initiated a secure backup of every single document, transferring the files to an encrypted external drive. I organized the data into neatly labeled folders, building a comprehensive portfolio of their fraud. I had the shell company registry the wire transfer logs, the active lawsuits, and the debt profiles. My mother had defended them, believing she was funding a dynasty. Instead, she had funded a sinking, fraudulent failure. This was only the beginning of their nightmare. I was ready for the war. I was ready for the war. For the next 3 days, I maintained absolute silence. I did not text my mother. I did not check my sister's social media accounts. I established a temporary routine from my hotel suite, heading to my accounting firm during the day and returning at night to compile my growing dossier of financial evidence. I operated with the clinical detachment required for forensic audits, treating my own family like targets in a federal investigation. I knew they would reach out eventually. Arrogant people always do when they hit a roadblock. On Thursday afternoon, my personal cell phone buzzed on my office desk. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. I let it ring 4 times, allowing the tension to build before pressing the accept button. I did not offer a greeting. I just lifted the phone to my ear and waited. Natalie Patricia said, her voice carrying a clipped, business-like tone. "I need you to check your personal email account right now. I am sending over a secure document that needs your digital signature immediately." She did not ask how I was doing. She did not ask where I had been sleeping, since she allowed her other daughter to throw me out into the freezing rain. She simply issued a demand, as if I were a disobedient employee. "I am at work," I replied, keeping my voice flat. "What is the document?" "It is just a standard tax form." Patricia sighed, sounding incredibly put out by the inconvenience. DeAndre was reviewing the portfolio with his certified public accountant this morning. The accountant flagged the wire transfer from our joint account. Because the amount exceeds the annual threshold, the Internal Revenue Service will classify it as taxable income for Apex Horizon Holdings. We are not paying a massive capital gains tax on family money. The accountant prepared an IRS gift tax exemption form. It legally classifies the $140,000 as a voluntary family gift from you to your sister. You just need to click the link sign the bottom and send it back so we can clear underwriting. I sat back in my ergonomic desk chair staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. The sheer audacity of her request was almost breathtaking. They had stolen my entire life savings, and now they wanted me to commit federal tax fraud to save them from the tax liability of their own theft. Let me make sure I understand you correctly, I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady whisper. You allowed DeAndre to empty my account to fund a fake commercial real estate venture. Now his accountant realizes that a sudden, undocumented influx of 6 figures looks exactly like money laundering. And your solution is for me to perjure myself on a federal tax document to shield your golden child from the IRS. Do not use that dramatic legal jargon with me, Patricia snapped. Nobody is perjuring anything. It is a simple administrative workaround. We are family, Natalie. People move money around like this all the time to protect their assets from the government. DeAndre says it is a standard real estate loophole. Just sign the document so we can move forward with the closing. I am not signing anything I stated with absolute finality. I am not voluntarily gifting my savings to a shell company. I am certainly not committing tax fraud to subsidize your favorite daughter's vanity project. If DeAndre has a tax problem, that is a consequence of his own reckless theft. Tell him to pay the taxes with the money he stole. There was a heavy pause on the line. When my mother spoke again, the faux business tone was gone, replaced by a venomous, sharp edge. You are going to sign that form, Natalie. You are going to sign it today, or you are going to regret it for the rest of your miserable life. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a promise, Patricia hissed. You think you are so untouchable because you sit in your fancy downtown office wearing your tailored suits. You think your little career makes you better than us. But you work for an elite financial institution, Natalie. A firm that values integrity and impeccable moral character. They handle accounts for billionaires and politicians. What do you think your senior partners would do if they received a phone call from your deeply concerned mother? I narrowed my eyes. What kind of phone call? A phone call detailing your recent mental breakdown? Patricia said, her voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. A tearful confession from a mother who is terrified because her eldest daughter has become completely unhinged. I will tell your managing partners that we had to kick you out of our home because you became violent and unpredictable. I will tell them that before you fled into the night, you stole highly valuable family heirlooms, vintage jewelry, and antique silver that has been in this family for generations. She paused, letting the weight of her fabricated story sink in. How long do you think a prestigious forensic accounting firm will employ an unstable, volatile thief? Patricia taunted. You handle highly sensitive financial data, Natalie. If there is even a shadow of a doubt about your mental stability and your moral compass, they will strip your security clearance and fire you before lunch. Your reputation in the financial sector will be permanently destroyed. No one will ever hire you again. You will lose everything: your career, your income, and your precious independence. The line went silent as she waited for my reaction. She expected me to panic. She expected me to beg her not to ruin my life. She was using my only remaining asset, my career, as leverage to force my compliance. It was a classic extortion tactic executed with the ruthless precision of a seasoned manipulator. Mom, I said, keeping my tone completely devoid of emotion. You are attempting to extort a forensic accountant over an open phone line. You are threatening to file false police reports and commit corporate defamation to compel me to sign a fraudulent IRS document. Sign the gift tax form. Natalie, Patricia commanded, ignoring my warning entirely. You have exactly 1 hour. If I do not receive the email confirmation from DocuSign by 2 o'clock, I am calling your firm's human resources department. Do not test me. The line went dead. She hung up, leaving me listening to the dial tone. I slowly lowered the phone and placed it face down on my desk. My mother was willing to obliterate my entire professional future just to save her son-in-law from a tax penalty. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But her desperation also revealed a critical weakness. They were scrambling. If DeAndre was rushing to forge tax documents to satisfy an accountant, it meant his financial house of cards was wobbling much faster than I anticipated. And if they were willing to resort to blatant extortion over a tax penalty, it meant they were hiding something significantly worse. I needed to dig deeper. I needed to look beyond the stolen cash and check the very foundation of my financial identity. My mother's aggressive extortion attempt was a massive red flag. Fraudsters do not panic over a simple tax form unless a much larger scheme is at risk of collapsing. I turned back to my laptop and pulled up a secure portal connected directly to the three major credit bureaus. I bypassed the standard consumer websites that offer free annual reports. Those systems are too slow and often mask the intricate details of real-time inquiries. Instead, I utilized the enterprise-level verification software my firm authorized for deep-dive background investigations. I typed in my social security number, my full legal name, and my previous addresses. The system authenticated my credentials and generated a comprehensive real-time breakdown of my entire credit history. I scrolled past the familiar lines of data: my active credit cards, my paid-off loans, and the flawless credit score I had spent a decade so meticulously building. But forensic accounting is not about looking at the obvious numbers. It is about hunting for the hidden anomalies. I filtered the report to show only hard credit inquiries initiated within the last 14 days. The screen refreshed, and my blood ran completely cold. There, sitting at the top of the list, was a massive unauthorized hard pull on my credit file. It was executed exactly 5 days ago, just 24 hours before my mother and sister drained my savings account. I looked at the name of the inquiring institution. Instead of a normal bank, the name on the screen sent a shockwave of pure adrenaline through my system. The United States Small Business Administration, the SBA, a federal government agency. My heart hammered against my ribs as I initiated a deeper trace on the inquiry code. The details populated on my screen, and the true, horrifying scope of their scheme finally revealed itself. My sister and DeAndre had not just stolen my $140,000, they had used it as a Trojan horse. The data showed an active, fully approved commercial loan application for Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. The total requested loan amount was $1.5 million. I stared at the screen, my mind rapidly connecting the financial dots. The SBA offers specialized commercial real estate loans designed to help small businesses acquire physical property. However, to qualify for these federal programs, applicants must meet stringent requirements. They need impeccable credit, a proven history of financial stability, and a mandatory cash down payment of at least 10%. DeAndre possessed absolutely none of those things. His credit was destroyed. His legal history was toxic. No legitimate financial institution would lend him a dime, let alone $1.5 million. So he and Brittany had found someone who could meet the stringent requirements: me. They stole my $140,000 to satisfy the 10% cash collateral requirement. But the cash was not enough. They needed my immaculate financial reputation to bypass the federal underwriting process. I pulled up the digital summary of the loan application. They're listed as the primary guarantor for the $1.5 million federal commercial loan was my name, my social security number, my employer details, my annual salary. They had stolen my entire financial identity. To finalize a loan of this magnitude, the primary guarantor must sign a mountain of legal documents under federal penalty of perjury. Brittany and DeAndre had forged my signature on every single one of those documents. They had submitted a completely fraudulent loan package to the United States federal government, explicitly tying my name to a massive debt for a commercial property I did not own. The realization hit me hard. If DeAndre defaulted on this loan and his track record guaranteed that the federal government would not go after his bankrupt shell company, they would come directly after the primary guarantor. They would garnish my wages. They would seize any property I owned. They would destroy my pristine credit score and plunge me into an inescapable abyss of financial ruin. Brittany and DeAndre had essentially mortgaged my entire future to fund their fake luxury lifestyle. This was no longer a domestic dispute over a joint banking account. This was no longer a bitter family disagreement about favoritism and respect. The stakes had just escalated into a completely different stratosphere. By forging my signature on an SBA application, they had crossed the line into aggravated identity theft. By transmitting those fraudulent documents across state lines to a federal lender, they had committed wire fraud. And by attempting to secure government-backed funds under false pretenses, they were guilty of federal bank fraud. These were not civil matters. These were severe mandatory minimum federal felonies. My mother had called me just 20 minutes ago threatening to ruin my career with a fabricated story about stolen silver and mental instability. She thought she held the ultimate leverage. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But she was entirely blind to the radioactive bomb her golden child had just planted under the family. I sat in the quiet hotel room staring at the irrefutable proof of their federal crimes. The sheer scale of their greed was staggering. They had thrown me out onto the street thinking I was a helpless, discarded victim. They assumed I would just cry, rebuild my savings, and let them enjoy their stolen empire. I reached for my phone and closed the banking portals. I did not feel sad anymore. I did not feel betrayed or heartbroken. I felt a cold, terrifying sense of absolute clarity. I was holding a one-way ticket to federal prison, and my sister had gladly written her own name on it. I needed to act immediately, but I could not do this alone. It was time to bring in someone who understood exactly how to handle federal financial crimes. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and dialed my boss. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Gavin was not the type of manager who engaged in small talk. He was 45 years old, a former special agent for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division, and currently the senior managing partner at my forensic accounting firm. He recruited me 3 years ago because he recognized that I possessed the same relentless obsession with numbers that made him a legend at the agency. Gavin, I need 20 minutes of your time first thing tomorrow morning, I said. It is an urgent personal matter that crosses into federal jurisdiction. I heard the rustle of paper on his end of the line. His tone shifted immediately from corporate detachment to sharp analytical focus. My office. 7:30 sharp. Bring documentation. He hung up. That was all I needed. I spent the rest of the night printing every digital file I had captured, organizing them into a thick, structured dossier. I categorized the evidence with color-coded tabs, creating a flawless timeline of the theft, the shell company creation, and the fraudulent loan application. By the time the sun rose over Lake Michigan, I was already walking through the glass doors of our downtown firm. Gavin was waiting at his desk. His office was a testament to his personality, completely free of clutter, highly organized and intimidating. He motioned for me to sit and held out his hand. I passed the heavy binder across the polished mahogany desk. Walk me through it, Gavin commanded, flipping open the cover. I kept my voice entirely steady. 4 days ago, my mother and sister executed an unauthorized wire transfer of $140,000 from a legacy joint account. The funds constituted my entire life savings. They routed the money to a newly formed limited liability company called Apex Horizon Holdings. Gavin scanned the first section, his eyes tracking the highlighted bank statements and corporate registry documents. He nodded slowly. A classic domestic theft utilizing a joint account loophole. Messy, but technically difficult to prosecute on its own. Your mother was an authorized signer. The police would likely call it a civil matter. Keep reading, I instructed. Flip to the section marked with the red tab. Gavin turned the pages. I watched his expression transform. The seasoned investigator who had seen every flavor of corporate embezzlement suddenly stiffened. He traced his finger along the printout of my credit report and the corresponding Small Business Administration loan application. The room went completely silent, save for the sound of him turning pages. He read the details of DeAndre's financial history, the pending lawsuits, and the forged primary guarantor signature. Gavin closed the folder and rested his hands flat on top of it. He looked up at me, his sharp blue eyes searching my face for any sign of hesitation. Natalie. Gavin began, his voice dropping to a serious, hushed register. Do you understand exactly what you are looking at here? I understand they stole my identity to secure a commercial loan, I replied. Gavin leaned forward. They did not just steal your identity. They defrauded the United States federal government. This is a $1.5 million SBA loan. Those funds are backed by the Treasury. By forging your signature and leveraging your pristine credit to bypass the underwriting requirements, your sister and her husband have committed aggravated identity theft, federal bank fraud, and wire fraud. I know, I said without flinching. If this loan defaults, and given this guy's catastrophic financial record, it absolutely will default. The federal government will come to collect, Gavin explained, laying out the brutal reality. They will seize your assets. They will garnish your wages. But more importantly, when the inevitable investigation launches, you will be the prime suspect. You will have to prove you did not collude with your family to defraud the government. Your career here would be over. They made sure I was the perfect fall guy, I stated. Gavin tapped the dossier. This is a guaranteed federal prison sentence, Natalie. The Department of Justice does not negotiate when people steal from the SBA. They prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. We are looking at a minimum of 10 to 15 years in a federal penitentiary for both of them. And if your mother knowingly facilitated the initial transfer to satisfy the down payment requirement, they might charge her with conspiracy and money laundering. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. He was watching me closely, measuring my emotional stability. He knew this was my family. He expected me to show some sign of conflict or grief. He expected me to ask for a way to save them. Natalie. I still have contacts at the Treasury Department and the SBA Inspector General office, Gavin offered softly. I can make a phone call right now. I can flag this application as an active fraud investigation. The underwriting department will freeze the process immediately. The loan will be canceled and the funds will never leave the Federal Reserve. We can stop this before the money is distributed. We can kill the deal today. I looked at the man who had mentored me, who had taught me how to dismantle financial criminals. I thought about my mother threatening to call him and lie about my mental health. I thought about my sister screaming at me to get out of her house. I thought about DeAndre, arrogant and laughing while wearing a watch paid for with my sweat and tears. They threw me away because they thought I was weak. I looked Gavin dead in the eye. The coldness in my chest had hardened into absolute, unbreakable titanium. No, I said, my voice completely devoid of mercy. Gavin raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. You want to let a fraudulent $1 million federal loan process under your name? Yes, I replied smoothly. If we stop the loan now, they just get a rejection letter. They will claim ignorance. They will say it was a misunderstanding or a paperwork error. They will walk away, keep my $140,000 and try this scheme on someone else. I want them to feel invincible. I want them to think they won. Gavin studied my face for a long moment. A slow, predatory smile began to form on his lips. He recognized the strategy immediately. The accountant in him appreciated the flawless execution of the trap. Let the federal funds hit their account. I instructed, delivering the final verdict. Let them spend it. Then we drop the hammer. Gavin agreed to the strategy. I spent the next 48 hours monitoring the federal loan status through my secure forensic portal. On Friday afternoon, the status officially changed from pending to disbursed. $1.5 million of federal funds was electronically wired into the Apex Horizon Holdings corporate account. They had officially taken the bait. The trap was set. Now I just needed them to step fully into the center of it. I did not have to wait long. On Monday morning, I was sitting in my glass-walled office on the 22nd floor reviewing an unrelated corporate audit. The reception area of our firm is designed to be completely silent, intimidating, and highly secure. That carefully curated silence was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps and a booming voice demanding to know which office belonged to Natalie. I looked up through the glass partition. DeAndre was marching down the executive corridor, completely ignoring the frantic protests of our receptionist. He was dressed like a walking billboard for new money. He wore a bespoke suit that cost more than a reliable used car, and a pair of designer loafers that clicked sharply against the marble floor. His brand-new diamond Rolex caught the overhead fluorescent lights. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind my desk, I could look down at the street level below. I knew without looking that his newly purchased Porsche 911 was parked illegally out front, a shiny metal trophy bought with my stolen identity. DeAndre did not bother to knock. He shoved my heavy glass door open and strode into my office as if he owned the entire building. The scent of an overpowering, expensive cologne filled the room instantly. He reached inside his leather portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. With a theatrical flick of his wrist, he slammed the paperwork directly onto the center of my desk, scattering my neatly organized audit files. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the edge of my desk, looming over me, with an expression of absolute arrogant triumph. I glanced down at the documents. The bold letters at the top of the first page read, "Quitclaim Deed." I looked back up at him, keeping my face perfectly blank. "What is this, DeAndre?" He flashed a brilliant, condescending smile. "That is the sound of progress, Natalie. Brittany and I are expanding our operational bandwidth. We just secured a massive influx of institutional capital, and we are moving to scale. But to maximize our leverage, we are tapping into the equity of your mother's townhouse. She is remortgaging the property to inject more liquidity into Apex Horizon Holdings." I stared at him, taking in the sheer magnitude of their greed. $1.5 million of federal money was not enough. They were now liquidating my mother's primary residence to fuel their imaginary empire. "And why do you need me to sign a quitclaim deed?" I asked, projecting a tone of exhausted defeat. DeAndre rolled his eyes, letting out a loud, exaggerated sigh. "Because the commercial underwriters are being overly cautious. Since you lived in the house for 5 years and have a documented history of paying utility bills and a portion of the property taxes, the bank is worried you might try to claim some sort of equitable interest in the property. They will not clear the cash-out refinance until you formally sign away any residual rights to the estate. We need your signature notarized and returned by tomorrow morning. You want me to sign away my only remaining connection to my childhood home so you can drain its value," I said, keeping my voice small and hesitant. DeAndre stood up straight, adjusting his designer silk tie. "Do not play the victim, Natalie. You already tried to derail our success once and it failed miserably. We are playing in the big leagues now. We just locked down 7 figures of pure capital. We are untouchable. You need to accept your place in this family hierarchy. You are a bitter spinster who sits in a cubicle judging people who actually take risks." He began pacing in front of my desk, waving his hands to emphasize his own perceived brilliance. "Brittany is building an absolute empire. She is beautiful, she is brilliant, and she is going to be one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. You should just sign the papers and get out of her way so she can do what she was born to do. Your mother believes in our vision. She is happily pulling the equity out of her house because she knows we guarantee a massive return on investment. You are the only obstacle left." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a nasty, mocking whisper. "Do not make this difficult. Your mother already told us how you threatened her. She already warned you what will happen to your precious little accounting career if you try to sabotage us again. You have zero leverage here. We hold all the cards. Sign the deed, Natalie. Let the people who actually know how to generate wealth handle the family business. Go back to your lonely apartment and your spreadsheets and let your beautiful sister win." I looked down at the quitclaim deed resting on my desk. DeAndre felt completely invincible. He was standing in the middle of a federal forensic accounting firm, loudly bragging about his financial moves, completely unaware that the woman sitting in front of him had the power to vaporize his entire existence. He wanted me to react. He wanted me to yell or cry or kick him out of my office. He wanted the ultimate satisfaction of knowing he had completely broken me. He wanted to feel like a powerful titan of industry dominating the weak sister-in-law. I let out a long, trembling breath and slumped my shoulders, allowing my posture to completely collapse. I looked down at my hands, letting them shake just enough to sell the performance. I needed him to believe I was entirely broken. Underneath my desk, my knee pressed against the hidden panic button we installed for hostile client encounters. But I did not press it to call security. I pressed a specific sequence that activated the high-definition ambient microphone embedded in my workstation monitor. It was a tool we normally use to record depositions for corporate audits. Now I was using it to record my brother-in-law. "You win, DeAndre," I whispered, my voice cracking perfectly. "I am just so tired. I am so tired of fighting you and fighting Brittany. Mom made her choice and it is clearly not me." DeAndre smiled a wide, predatory grin. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and leaned against my glass partition, completely relaxed now that he had established dominance. "Finally, you are talking some sense. It took you long enough to realize you cannot beat us. We are moving too fast." I pulled the quitclaim deed toward me and picked up a pen, staring blankly at the signature line. "I just do not understand how you pulled this off," I murmured, shaking my head in feigned bewilderment. "I know commercial real estate is difficult. My savings were only $140,000. That is nothing in the commercial market. How did you possibly secure $1.5 million in institutional capital? How did you get past the federal underwriters? I mean, your credit history is—" I stopped myself abruptly, acting as if I was terrified to insult him. DeAndre let out a loud, booming laugh. He loved this. He absolutely loved having an audience to witness his perceived genius, especially an audience he viewed as a defeated rival. He could not resist the urge to educate me, to show off how he outsmarted the system. "My credit is temporarily leveraged, Natalie," he corrected me, waving his hand dismissively. "But commercial lenders are dinosaurs. They only look at paper algorithms. They do not see the visionary behind the project. We needed a primary guarantor to satisfy their rigid underwriting matrix. Someone with a spotless financial record to back the SBA loan application." I looked up at him, my eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "But Mom does not have the credit score for a federal commercial loan. How did you get the Small Business Administration to approve the disbursement?" DeAndre smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. He was practically vibrating with arrogance. "We did not use your mother, Natalie. We used you." I gasped, gripping the edge of my desk. "Me? But I never spoke to a loan officer. I never signed anything. You did not have to." He bragged, his voice echoing clearly toward the hidden microphone. "Your credit score is flawless. 810. It is a thing of beauty. Brittany still had copies of your old W-2 forms and tax returns from when you lived at the house. We just bundled your financials into the application package. When it came time to execute the final guarantor agreements, Brittany just copied your signature. She is incredibly good at it. You have to admit, it was a brilliant strategic pivot. We used your immaculate financial profile to secure the federal SBA loan. You are officially the primary backer of Apex Horizon Holdings." My heart raced, but my face remained a mask of sheer horror. "You forged my signature on federal loan documents. Do not use that ugly word," DeAndre chided, shaking his head as if I were overreacting. "We repurposed your signature for the greater good of the family." The bank did not verify anything in person because the cash collateral from your savings account cleared the system perfectly. It was a seamless integration. The funds hit our account on Friday. We are completely liquid. Now sign the deed so we can close this next phase of the operation." I looked down at the paperwork. Signing a quitclaim deed under these circumstances was legally meaningless. Once the FBI unraveled the SBA fraud, the bank would freeze my mother's property anyway as a product of a criminal enterprise. But my signature right now was the final price of admission for his confession. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name. My hand moved slowly, deliberately, playing the part of the defeated sister until the very last stroke. I slid the documents back across the desk toward him. DeAndre snatched the paperwork, snatching his victory right out of my hands. He tapped the edges of the paper against the desk to align them and slid them back into his leather portfolio. "See how easy that was?" he mocked, zipping the portfolio shut. "You stay in your lane, and we stay in ours. Brittany is throwing a massive housewarming and success gala at your mother's mansion this weekend. All the elite players in Chicago real estate will be there. Do us all a favor and stay away. We do not need your depressing energy bringing down the vibe." I kept my eyes glued to the desk. "I will stay away, DeAndre. You have my word." He laughed, a harsh, victorious sound that rattled the glass walls of my office. He turned and marched out the door exactly the way he came, in projecting absolute superiority to everyone he passed. I waited until his heavy footsteps faded completely down the executive corridor. I waited until the elevator dinged, signaling his departure from my floor. Then I sat up perfectly straight. The illusion of the broken sister vanished instantly. I reached under my desk and keyed the sequence to terminate the audio recording. A small green light blinked on my monitor, confirming the digital audio file was properly saved locally. I quickly played the audio file back. Excellent. The audio file was crystal clear. Every word DeAndre had spoken, every arrogant boast about forging my signature and bypassing federal underwriting, was captured flawlessly. I forwarded the encrypted file to my private server, locked my workstation, and let a full week pass. During that week, the digital world belonged entirely to my sister. The narrative shifted from the quiet, calculating silence of my hotel room to the loud spectacle of Brittany's social media feeds. She had unleashed herself. The influx of $1.5 million in stolen federal funds acted like gasoline on the fire of her narcissism. If you looked at her online accounts, you would think she was the next self-made billionaire. She posted non-stop, documenting every single waking second of her fake ascent to the top of the Chicago social ladder. Her first major post of the week featured her standing in front of a sprawling high-end commercial loft in the West Loop district. The caption read, "Sign the lease on the new global headquarters for Brittany Cosmetics. When you grind hard, the universe rewards you." She had not ground hard for anything. She had stolen my social security number, committed federal wire fraud, and used taxpayer money to secure a commercial lease she could never afford on her own. But her followers ate it up. The comments section was a sea of fire emojis and praises from fake friends and opportunistic social climbers. The spending spree that followed was staggering. Brittany posted a series of videos showing the interior design process for her new headquarters. She hired expensive contractors to install marble flooring, custom lighting fixtures, and imported Italian leather sofas for the waiting room. She bought towering floral arrangements that cost thousands of dollars just to sit in the background of her selfies. She posted a video of herself swiping a corporate credit card to pay for a massive order of inventory, oblivious to the fact that the card was directly tied to the fraudulent federal loan bearing my forged signature. Every post was a masterclass in dramatic irony. She was building a lavish cage for herself and enthusiastically broadcasting the evidence to the world. My mother was right there beside her, acting as her ultimate hype woman. Patricia featured prominently in every video, hovering in the background with a glass of champagne soaking up the artificial glory. Patricia left paragraphs of praise in the comment sections of Brittany's posts. "So incredibly proud of my brilliant daughter and my visionary son-in-law," Patricia wrote under a picture of Brittany and DeAndre posing next to the new Porsche. "You two are the definition of self-made success. You took a dream and turned it into an empire. Hard work and family loyalty always pay off." family loyalty. The hypocrisy of those words would have made me sick if I were not so hyper-focused on the end game. Patricia was completely intoxicated by the illusion of wealth. I knew exactly what she was doing offline as well. She was parading around her country club, showing off the photos to her wealthy friends, bragging about how her youngest daughter had just secured millions in institutional funding. Patricia was rewriting our family history to anyone who would listen. According to her new narrative, Brittany and DeAndre were financial prodigies, and I was just the bitter, estranged older sister who could not handle their massive success. DeAndre was equally insufferable. His social media presence was a constant barrage of arrogant posturing. He posted videos of himself driving the Porsche through downtown Chicago, wearing the diamond Rolex bought with my life savings, giving motivational speeches to the camera about how to conquer the real estate market. He talked about leveraging assets, outsmarting the system, and moving like a titan of industry. He tagged other prominent real estate developers, trying to force his way into their elite circles. He believed he had outsmarted the system. He thought because the bank cleared the transaction, he was a genius. He had no concept of how federal financial tracking actually works. As the week progressed, the posts escalated. They were burning through the federal loan money at a speed. They hosted a lavish opening party at the new cosmetics headquarters. The catering alone must have cost $20,000. Brittany wore a designer gown dripping in newly purchased jewelry, posing in front of a massive flower wall bearing her brand logo. DeAndre walked around handing out expensive cigars, acting like he owned the city block. They were living in a total fantasy, a bubble held together by a forged signature and an impending federal indictment. They felt untouchable. They thought they had executed the perfect crime. They had the money, they had the cars, they had the real estate, and they had pushed me out of the picture. In their minds, they had won the victory. They had taken everything they wanted and faced zero consequences. I watched all of this unfold from the security of my private office. I did not block them. I did not report their posts. I simply screen recorded every single video and took high-resolution screenshots of every single photo. Every brag about their new corporate headquarters, every video showing off their luxury purchases, every comment my mother made praising their fraudulent business acumen. I documented it all. They were eagerly providing the federal government with a perfect time-stamped roadmap of exactly how and where they were laundering the stolen funds. Tomorrow was finally Saturday morning, the day of Patricia's highly anticipated housewarming and incredible success gala at the family mansion. It was meant to be the absolute crowning moment of their week, the showcase of their new wealth to the Chicago elite. They were preparing for the biggest party of their lives, ordering custom ice sculptures and expensive caviar, completely unaware that I was preparing to hand them over to the United States federal government to end their fraudulent reign forever. On Friday morning, while my mother and sister were busy selecting ice sculptures and arranging caviar for their magnificent high society gala, I was sitting in a soundproof conference room on the top floor of my accounting firm. The heavy mahogany door was locked, and the privacy blinds were drawn tight. Sitting across the polished table from me was Gavin. Next to him sat Special Agent Harrison of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agent Harrison was a veteran of the white-collar crime division. He wore a sharp, dark suit projecting an aura of quiet, intimidating authority. He did not care about family drama or social media followers. He cared about paper trails, federal statutes, and putting financial criminals behind bars. I slid a heavily bound 300-page forensic audit across the table toward him. The binder was categorized with color-coded tabs representing weeks of relentless, meticulous investigation. "This is the complete operational timeline," I said, keeping my voice purely professional. The first tab contains the unauthorized wire transfer logs, detailing the theft of $140,000 from a joint retail banking account. The second tab documents the immediate creation of Apex Horizon Holdings, a shell company registered to DeAndre. The third tab outlines the complete dissipation of those initial stolen funds into luxury consumer goods and unsecured corporate credit lines. Agent Harrison opened the binder. his eyes scanning the highlighted bank routing numbers and state registry filings. He nodded slowly, turning the pages with practiced efficiency. "You have built a solid foundation here, Natalie," he noted. "Domestic theft and structural embezzlement. But Gavin mentioned you had something that triggers federal jurisdiction." "I do," I replied, motioning to the red tab in the center of the binder. "Open Section 4. Agent Harrison flipped to the red tab. I watched his face closely. For a man who hunted corporate embezzlers for a living, it took a lot to shock him. But as he read the Small Business Administration loan application, his eyebrows shot up. He traced his finger along the signature line, then looked at the printed credit report attached to the back of the application. "They utilized your social security number and your financial history to bypass federal underwriting for a $1.5 million commercial loan," Agent Harrison stated, summarizing the catastrophic crime staring back at him. "And they forged your signature as the primary guarantor." "Exactly," I confirmed. "The federal funds were dispersed directly into the Apex Horizon Holdings account last Friday. Since then, they have spent approximately $300,000 of that government money on a commercial lease, luxury office renovations, and private events. The full expenditure tracking is in Section 5. Every single swiped credit card and signed vendor check is documented and time-stamped." Agent Harrison leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the table. "The paperwork is flawless," he admitted. "But defense attorneys in federal court love to argue intent. They will claim you gave them verbal permission to use your identity or that it was a family business misunderstanding. Juries can get confused by joint accounts and family dynamics. We need concrete, irrefutable proof that they knowingly and maliciously forged your signature without your consent." Gavin smiled his signature predatory smile. He looked at me and gave a slight nod. I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out a secure encrypted flash drive, and placed it on the table right next to the binder. "I anticipated the intent argument," I said. "2 days ago, DeAndre came into this exact office building to demand my signature on a quitclaim deed. He wanted to remortgage my mother's house to extract even more cash. During that conversation, I activated a high-definition ambient recording system. I plugged the flash drive into the conference room computer and pressed play. The room filled with the crystal-clear audio of my brother-in-law. DeAndre's arrogant, booming voice echoed off the soundproof walls. I let the recording play through the entire exchange. Agent Harrison listened intently as DeAndre bragged about how commercial lenders were dinosaurs. He listened as DeAndre explicitly admitted to using my flawless credit score, and he listened as DeAndre proudly confessed that Brittany had copied my signature to secure the federal funds. When the audio file finished, the room descended into a heavy, absolute silence. Agent Harrison stared at the computer speakers for several seconds. He slowly turned his gaze back to me, a look of profound professional respect crossing his features. Agent Harrison closed the heavy binder and placed his hands flat on the cover. He looked at Gavin, then back to me. "In my 15 years with the Bureau, I have rarely seen a victim hand-deliver a fully wrapped, completely indisputable federal case. There is no defense attorney in the country who can spin that audio recording. You just gave us the smoking gun." "What are the exact charges?" Gavin asked, shifting into his former law enforcement persona. Agent Harrison began listing them off, checking them on his fingers. "Aggravated identity theft carries a mandatory 2-year consecutive sentence. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years per count. Making false statements to the Small Business Administration is another federal felony. And because they are actively spending the illegally obtained federal funds on luxury goods and commercial leases, we are adding severe money laundering charges to the indictment. This is a slam dunk case. They are looking at a minimum of 10 to 15 years in federal prison." I felt a deep, profound sense of vindication wash over me. The anxiety and betrayal of the past few weeks solidified into pure justice. "I will head back to the field office right now." Agent Harrison continued, standing up and gathering the binder and the flash drive. "I am taking this directly to the United States Attorney. We have the wire transfer logs, the forged federal documents, the tracing of the laundered money, and a recorded confession. I can have a federal judge sign the search and arrest warrants by tomorrow morning. We will freeze every single asset attached to their names, including your mother's house, since it is now entangled in their financial network. Agent Harrison paused at the conference room door. We usually execute these warrants early in the morning at their residence to minimize variables. I stood up, smoothing the front of my suit jacket. I looked at the federal agent, my expression entirely resolute. My mother is hosting a massive high society gala tomorrow evening at her mansion. All of their wealthy friends, potential investors, and country club associates will be there. It is a housewarming party to celebrate their fraudulent success. Agent Harrison stopped. He looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. They wanted to be the center of attention, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. They wanted everyone in Chicago to see how powerful and wealthy they are. I think we should give them exactly the audience they wanted. Execute the warrants tomorrow night, right in the middle of their party. Agent Harrison shared a look with Gavin. A slow, definitive nod followed. Tomorrow night it is. Agent Harrison agreed. The legal noose is officially tied, Natalie. Tomorrow we pull the trapdoor. After Agent Harrison left the conference room, the reality of what was about to happen settled over me. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a federal operation. Later that afternoon, Harrison called my secure line to confirm the logistics. A federal judge had reviewed our dossier and immediately signed off on all search and arrest warrants. The execution was scheduled for 8 o'clock Saturday evening. I listened as Harrison outlined the tactical approach. They would deploy 3 teams of agents, one to secure the perimeter of the estate, one to breach the front entrance, and a financial crimes unit to instantly seize any electronic devices, ledgers, and bank records found on the premises. I waited for him to finish before making my one and only demand. I want to be there, I said. I want to walk through those doors before your teams breach. I need to look them in the eye right before their world ends. Harrison hesitated. Civilian presence during a federal raid is highly irregular and potentially dangerous. But I reminded him that I was the primary victim and the sole architect of the case they were about to execute. I promised to stay out of the physical line of operations. I just needed to be in the room. After a long pause, he agreed. He instructed me to enter the gala exactly 5 minutes before the raid commenced and to step away from the targets the moment the sirens sounded. Meanwhile, across the city, my mother and sister were completely consumed by their own vanity. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances and highly public social media posts, I knew every detail of their magnificent gala. Patricia had spared absolutely no expense utilizing the fraudulent funds to host what she was calling a celebration of generational success. The guest list was a who is who of the Chicago social elite. She had invited the entire board of her country club, local politicians, and wealthy real estate developers DeAndre desperately wanted to impress. They had hired a renowned catering company to serve prime rib and imported caviar. A string quartet was booked to play in the grand foyer. Brittany had hired a professional photography team to document her triumph, setting up a customized step and repeat banner bearing the Apex Horizon Holdings logo. They were transforming the very house I was violently evicted from into a monument of their stolen glory. They were throwing the party of the decade, entirely unaware that the catering staff would soon be replaced by armed federal agents. The sheer magnitude of their hubris was astounding. They had invited everyone they considered important to witness their ascension, completely oblivious that they had actually invited an audience for their spectacular downfall. Every champagne toast they planned, every boastful speech they rehearsed, and every hand they intended to shake would soon become irrefutable evidence of their criminal greed. They were building their own gilded cage, and they were locking themselves inside it with an absolute breathtaking level of pure arrogance. With the tactical plan locked in place, I had my own preparations to make. I was not going to walk back into that mansion looking like the defeated, heartbroken woman they threw out into the freezing rain 3 weeks ago. I left the office early on Saturday and drove to a high-end boutique on the Magnificent Mile. I did not care about the cost. I needed armor. I spent 2 hours working with a personal stylist to find the exact perfect outfit. I purchased a stunning razor-sharp tailored suit in a deep authoritative charcoal gray. The cut was immaculate, projecting absolute power and uncompromising professionalism. I paired it with a crisp silk blouse and stilettos that sounded like a gavel hitting a judge's desk with every step. I spent the rest of the afternoon at a salon having my hair and makeup done with cold, precise perfection. When I finally stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hotel room, the transformation was complete. The quiet, accommodating daughter who had subsidized her mother's lifestyle was gone. The sister who had silently absorbed years of toxic narcissism was dead. The woman staring back at me was a highly trained financial investigator who had just orchestrated the flawless destruction of her abusers. I looked dangerous. I looked untouchable. The sun began to set over the Chicago skyline, casting long, dark shadows across the city streets. I checked my watch. It was 7 o'clock. I had exactly 1 hour until Agent Harrison and his teams descended on the property. I grabbed my keys, walked out of my hotel room, and took the elevator down to the parking garage. I slid into the driver's seat of my practical, unassuming sedan, the same car I had packed my entire life into just a few weeks prior. I started the engine and pulled out onto the road. The drive to the suburbs took 45 minutes. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A brief encrypted text message from Agent Harrison illuminated the screen. "Teams are in position. Await my signal." I did not reply. I just kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. As I turned onto the familiar tree-lined street of my mother's upscale neighborhood, the sheer scale of the event became immediately apparent. The street was lined with luxury vehicles, sleek black town cars, and expensive sports coupes. Valet attendants in crisp white shirts were jogging back and forth up the long, curved driveway. I bypassed the valet stand entirely, pulling my car onto a quiet side street a block away from the mansion. I parked the car, turned off the ignition, and sat in the silence for a moment. The night air was exceptionally crisp and brutally cold. I stepped out of the vehicle, smoothed the lapels of my brand-new tailored suit, and began the short, deliberate walk toward the glowing lights of the estate. The cold wind bit at my face, but I barely felt it. The rhythm of my heels clicking against the pavement grounded me. As I approached the main gates, the sheer scale of their grotesque vanity came into full view. They had hired an exterior lighting company to bathe the mansion in a warm, golden glow. Enormous floodlights illuminated the brick facade, making the house look like a monument to their fabricated success. A red carpet was literally rolled out across the front steps leading up to the double oak doors I had been shoved out of just 21 days ago. I bypassed the cluster of valets who were busy sprinting between a silver Bentley and a customized Range Rover. A security guard in a black suit stood near the entrance holding a tablet device, presumably checking names off the master guest list. I did not slow my pace. I walked with such absolute, unwavering authority that he simply stepped aside, assuming I was a highly important guest who did not require screening. I reached the heavy oak doors, grabbed the solid brass handle, and pulled. The wall of sound and heat hit me instantly. The grand foyer had been completely transformed. A live string quartet was positioned on the landing of the sweeping spiral staircase, playing a lively classical piece that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. To my left, a team of uniformed servers stood behind a long ice-carved tasting bar, meticulously assembling tiny blinis topped with imported beluga caviar and creme fraiche. To my right, a professional mixologist was pouring vintage champagne into a towering pyramid of crystal coupes. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, roasted meats, and the cloying sweet aroma of thousands of imported white roses arranged in massive cascading centerpieces. I stepped fully into the entryway, letting the heavy oak door click shut behind me. I stood there for a moment, taking in the absolute sheer audacity of the spectacle. Every single flower, every drop of champagne, and every hour of labor from the catering staff was paid for with a forged signature on a federal document. The room was packed with the Chicago elite. I recognized local politicians, prominent bank executives, and high-profile real estate developers. They were laughing, clinking glasses, and exchanging business cards, completely oblivious to the fact that they were currently standing inside a massive active crime scene. I began to walk forward. I moved slowly, my posture rigid, and my head held high. My charcoal gray suit was a sharp, aggressive contrast to the sea of sequined cocktail dresses and bright silk gowns surrounding me. I did not look like a guest. I looked like an executioner. As I moved deeper into the main living room, the atmosphere around me began to shift. It started as a subtle ripple. A few guests near the entryway stopped talking, turning their heads to follow my progression. The sharp, rhythmic clicking of my stilettos against the imported hardwood floor seemed to cut through the ambient noise of the party. The wealthy socialites parted naturally, stepping aside to create a narrow, unhindered path for me. They could sense the shift in energy. The lively chatter in my immediate vicinity dissolved into hushed, confused whispers. Even the string quartet seemed to lose their tempo, the cellist hesitating for a fraction of a second as the tension in the room suddenly spiked. I kept my eyes locked straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the stares. I was a predator moving through a flock of brightly colored birds, and my focus was entirely locked on my targets. I reached the center of the expansive living room, stopping right beneath the massive crystal chandelier. The crowd had formed a loose circle around me, a silent audience to the impending collision. I stood perfectly still, my hands resting relaxed at my sides, and slowly scanned the far end of the room. It took less than 5 seconds to find them. They were holding court near the floor-to-ceiling bay windows, the exact spot where my mother had turned her back on me 3 weeks ago. Patricia was wearing a shimmering emerald gown, her neck heavy with diamonds, laughing uproariously at a joke made by a city councilman. Brittany stood next to her, looking like a plastic imitation of royalty, in a custom white designer dress, her stolen Birkin bag prominently displayed on the cocktail table beside her. DeAndre was flanking them, holding a snifter of expensive cognac, wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket and his signature arrogant smirk. They were the absolute center of attention, soaking in the admiration of their wealthy peers. And then Patricia turned her head. Her laughter died instantly in her throat. The emerald dress seemed to lose its sparkle as her eyes locked onto mine across the sea of guests. The color rapidly drained from her face, leaving her pale and rigid. She reached out her trembling fingers, gripping Brittany's arm to steady herself. Brittany, annoyed by the sudden grab, turned to see what had frightened our mother. When Brittany saw me standing under the chandelier, her jaw physically dropped. Her smug expression shattered, replaced by a look of profound, unadulterated shock. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination from her vision. DeAndre was the last to notice. He followed their paralyzed gazes, his arrogant smirk melting away the moment he spotted my charcoal suit. His grip on his cognac glass tightened so fiercely I thought the crystal might shatter in his hand. They stood completely frozen, trapped in the glaring spotlight of their own grand gala. The elite guests surrounding them finally noticed the target of their horrified stares and turned to look back at me. The ambient noise in the massive living room dropped to a dead, heavy silence. The entire mansion held its collective breath. I did not blink. The entire mansion held its collective breath. I did not blink. The heavy silence stretched for several agonizing seconds, thick with the unsaid tension of a family dynamic laid bare in front of Chicago's elite. Slowly, the shock on Brittany's face melted away, replaced by the familiar venomous sneer of a golden child who believed she was entirely untouchable. She released her grip on my mother's arm, straightened her posture, and took a long sip from her crystal champagne flute. She stepped away from the bay windows and began to march across the room toward me. Her white designer dress flowed behind her, a stark symbol of the federal fraud she was so proudly wearing. The crowd parted further, giving her the stage she so desperately craved. She stopped just 3 feet in front of me, looking me up and down with exaggerated disgust. Ha ha. The failure came back. Brittany laughed. She tilted her head, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. What is the matter? Natalie, did you run out of money already? Is that why you are crashing my high society gala in a boring gray office suit? I told you 3 weeks ago that you were no longer welcome in this house. This is a celebration for successful people, not a charity shelter for bitter spinsters who cannot afford their own down payments. Brittany was projecting the ultimate aura of superior wealth. She took another sip of champagne. I mean, honestly, Natalie, you have some nerve walking in here tonight. We are celebrating real tangible success, and you show up here looking like a desperate rain cloud, trying to rain on my parade. Did you really think you could just waltz back in here and beg for a handout after the way you threatened us? You are pathetic. Patricia recovered her composure and quickly followed her daughter's lead. She pushed past a city councilman and hurried over to stand beside Brittany. Her face was flushed with anger, painfully aware of the wealthy friends watching her family drama unfold. Natalie, what on earth do you are doing? Patricia scolded, her voice a harsh reprimand. You are embarrassing this entire family. I am hosting the most important night of our lives. Elite investors are here. People who actually matter are here. And you show up uninvited to throw a tantrum because you could not stand to see your sister succeed. You have always been so incredibly selfish. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides, my expression a mask of calm. I let them dig their own graves. I gave you everything, Patricia continued, her voice rising. I raised you, I housed you, I gave you every opportunity to be successful, but you chose to be difficult. We are building a legacy here. Brittany and DeAndre are creating generational wealth, and all you can do is try to drag them down out of pure jealousy. I want you to turn around and walk right back out that door before you humiliate yourself any further. DeAndre swaggered over, sliding his hands into the pockets of his velvet tuxedo jacket. He stood next to Brittany, putting a protective arm around her waist. He looked me up and down, a nasty smirk playing on his lips as he shook his head in mock pity. Look at you, DeAndre said. You could not stay away, could you? You had to come see what real power looks like. You tried to scare us with your forensic accounting jargon. But look around. Natalie, look at the catering. Look at the guest list. We closed the deal. We are operating on a level of institutional wealth that you cannot even comprehend. He gestured broadly to the room. My wife is a beauty mogul. I am acquiring commercial properties. We are the new elite, and you are just the angry, jealous sister who got left behind because you were too scared to take a risk. You thought you could dictate terms to us. You thought you could control the narrative. But you have zero power here. You are completely irrelevant. DeAndre took a sip of his expensive cognac. I told you to stay in your lane. I gave you explicit instructions to stay away from this gala. We do not have time to deal with your petty grievances. We are busy entertaining titans, so since you clearly lack the social grace to leave when you are unwanted, I am going to have to handle this the corporate way. He snapped his fingers. He turned his head toward the front entrance, locking eyes with the large security guard in the black suit, who had let me in minutes earlier. Security, DeAndre barked. We have an uninvited guest who is trespassing on private property and harassing the hosts. I need you to get over here right now and physically escort my jealous sister-in-law off the premises. If she resists, call the local precinct and have her arrested for disturbing the peace. We are done playing nice with the family. Failure. The large security guard hesitated for a long moment, clearly unsure of exactly how to properly handle a tense domestic dispute among the wealthy hosts. But DeAndre merely glared at him, projecting the full weight of a man who believed his stolen millions gave him the absolute right to command the world. I said, "Remove her right now," DeAndre demanded, pointing directly toward the heavy front door. "Get her out of my sight." Brittany took another sip of champagne, her smirk widening into a full, victorious grin. Patricia crossed her arms, nodding in agreement with her son-in-law, completely comfortable watching her eldest daughter be forcefully ejected from a high society party. They stood there, a unified front of greed. They were at the absolute peak of their fake mountain, convinced they had humiliated me for the final time. They thought they had written the ending to this story. They thought they had won. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I offered no defense to the crowd of wealthy onlookers. I stood perfectly still in the center of the grand living room, a solitary anchor of calm amidst their storm of manufactured outrage. The security guard hesitated, clearly intimidated by the sheer intensity of the room, before he began walking toward me. His heavy footsteps echoed over the classical music still playing softly from the string quartet on the stairs. DeAndre puffed out his chest, a victorious gleam in his eyes, expecting me to turn and run. Brittany took another sip of her champagne, leaning closer to our mother to share a whispered joke about my eviction. They were completely blind to the reality of the situation. I raised my left wrist with slow, deliberate precision. I pulled back the cuff of my tailored charcoal suit and looked down at my watch. The silver hands clicked neatly into place. It was exactly 8 in the evening, the exact minute Agent Harrison had specified, the exact minute their fraudulent empire was scheduled for demolition. I lowered my wrist and locked my gaze onto my sister. The security guard was only 10 feet away now, reaching his hand out to grab my shoulder. I ignored him. Instead, I took a single purposeful step forward, then another. I walked toward Brittany, DeAndre, and Patricia. My stilettos clicked sharply against the hardwood floor, slicing through the tension. My sheer confidence caused the security guard to stop dead in his tracks. He lowered his hand, sensing he was utterly out of his depth. The wealthy guests stepped further back, widening the circle, sensing a massive shift in the power dynamic. DeAndre lost his smirk. His body tensed, his protective arm dropping from Brittany's waist as he braced for a physical confrontation. But I had no intention of throwing a punch. I was armed with something far more devastating than physical force. I possessed the absolute truth. I stopped mere inches from my sister. I smelled the expensive perfume she had purchased with my stolen savings. I was close enough to see the tiny pulse of fear beating rapidly in the hollow of her throat. The golden child realized I was not afraid. I was not intimidated by her fake wealth or her elite audience. Patricia stepped forward, positioning herself defensively between her younger daughter and me. Her emerald gown shimmered under the chandelier light, but her face was stark white with sudden terror. "What are you doing here?" Natalie, Patricia demanded. Her voice lacked the commanding authority it possessed just a minute ago. It was shaking, brittle, and laced with genuine panic. She looked wildly around the room, hoping someone would intervene and protect her from the reckoning standing right in front of her. I looked my mother dead in the eye, offering absolute freezing detachment. Then I shifted my focus back to my sister. Brittany stared back at me, her champagne flute trembling in her manicured hand. The absolute certainty of her victory was crumbling rapidly. I allowed a faint cold smile to touch my lips. It was the smile of a hunter watching a trap snap shut. I leaned in close, invading her personal space, making sure my voice carried only to the 3 people who had ruined my life. "Shh, do not panic," I whispered, my tone soft, steady, and completely devoid of mercy. "Just start praying." Brittany furrowed her brow, her mouth opening to hurl another insult. DeAndre surged forward, raising his hand to shove me away from his wife. He never made contact. In that exact fraction of a second, a sound so loud, so violently abrupt, ripped through the elegant atmosphere of the mansion. The deafening, high-pitched wail of heavy police sirens shattered the quiet hum of the high society gala. The string quartet stopped playing instantly, the cellist dropping his bow in sheer terror. The sophisticated chatter of the guests turned into a collective gasp of shock. The heavy bass of the sirens grew exponentially louder, vibrating through the massive glass windows, rattling the crystal glasses resting on the small cocktail tables. Before anyone could even process the deafening noise, the visual assault began. Blinding bursts of red and blue emergency lights flooded through the floor-to-ceiling bay windows. The intense strobing colors sliced through the warm golden glow of the chandeliers, painting the terrified faces of the elite guests in harsh alternating flashes of crimson and sapphire. The elegant, perfectly curated aesthetic of the housewarming party was instantly annihilated. Panic erupted in the living room. Women in expensive designer gowns shrieked and grabbed their partners. Wealthy investors and local politicians scrambled backward, tripping over catering tables and knocking over towering floral arrangements in a desperate bid to get away from the windows. Outside, the screech of heavy tires tearing across the pavement echoed through the night. The sound of massive engines revving hard was accompanied by the violent crunching of metal and the snapping of wood. Through the giant bay windows, the crowd watched in absolute horror as multiple black tactical SUVs jumped the curb. The heavy federal vehicles tore onto the meticulously manicured front lawn, their deep tread tires ripping massive chunks of expensive sod into the air. They obliterated the pristine landscaping, crushing the decorative hedges and smashing through the custom exterior lighting fixtures Patricia had proudly installed. The SUVs formed a tight barricade around the front perimeter of the estate, their high-beam headlights blinding anyone looking outside. The guests were completely trapped. The massive house was entirely surrounded. DeAndre stumbled backward, his cognac glass slipping from his hand and shattering against the hardwood floor. Brittany let out a piercing scream, dropping her champagne flute, as the reality of my warning finally crashed down upon her. Patricia covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with unimaginable dread. The bubble of their fraudulent empire had officially burst. The federal government had arrived. The heavy oak front doors of the mansion did not just open. They were violently breached. A tactical battering ram shattered the custom brass lock, sending splinters of expensive wood flying across the imported marble floor. The elegant string quartet instruments were completely abandoned as the musicians scrambled for cover. Heavily armed federal agents poured into the entryway, their tactical gear a terrifying contrast to the high society gala. They moved with synchronized precision, forming a heavily armored perimeter within seconds. At the front stood Special Agent Harrison, projecting an aura of uncompromising authority. "Federal agents, nobody move!" Harrison bellowed. His voice was a booming command that echoed off the vaulted ceilings and overpowered the ambient noise. The high society guests screamed in absolute terror. Wealthy socialites dropped their crystal champagne flutes, the expensive glass shattering against the hardwood floor. Prominent politicians and real estate developers threw their hands into the air, frantically backing away from the armed tactical teams. Catered trays of imported caviar and prime rib were knocked to the ground in the stampede of panicked elites, trying to distance themselves from whatever criminal activity had just triggered a massive federal raid. The atmosphere of arrogant luxury was instantly replaced by sheer panic. Agent Harrison scanned the massive living room, his sharp eyes cutting through the chaos until he found his target standing frozen near the bay windows. I stepped back, melting into the terrified crowd, giving the federal agents a clear and unobstructed path to the golden child and her fraudulent husband. Harrison marched straight across the room. The sea of wealthy guests parted frantically, clearing a wide aisle for the federal agent and the two tactical officers flanking him. Patricia stood paralyzed, her emerald gown trembling as the reality of the situation locked her muscles in place. She looked desperately at her country club friends, hoping for intervention, but saw only horror and absolute judgment reflecting back at her. Her elite social circle was watching her family get dismantled in real time. Brittany was hyperventilating, her manicured hands clutching her custom designer dress, her eyes wide with a level of fear she had never experienced. DeAndre looked like a cornered animal, his chest heaving as the certainty of federal prison stared him right in the face. Agent Harrison stopped directly in front of them. He spoke with maximum volume, ensuring every influential guest in the room heard exactly why the federal government had crashed their prestigious housewarming gala. DeAndre Washington and Brittany Washington Harrison announced, his voice carrying the full weight of the United States Justice Department. "I have federal warrants for your immediate arrest. You are both being charged with aggravated identity theft, federal bank fraud, and multiple counts of money laundering." The collective gasp from the crowd of socialites was highly audible. The elite investors DeAndre had been trying to impress now looked at him with absolute disgust. The narrative was permanently destroyed. They were common thieves who had stolen a federal commercial loan and laundered the cash to buy fake prestige. The public exposure broke DeAndre. The facade of the confident, untouchable real estate mogul completely evaporated. Panic overtook his rational thought. In a desperate, entirely futile act of self-preservation, DeAndre spun around and bolted toward the rear patio doors. He shoved his way past a terrified waiter, knocking over a towering floral arrangement in his frantic bid for freedom. He did not make it far. The tactical agents had anticipated the flight response. Two heavily armored agents intercepted him before he could even reach the glass doors. They grabbed his velvet tuxedo jacket, twisting his arms violently behind his back. The forward momentum and downward force sent DeAndre crashing hard toward the ground. He was slammed face first onto the custom-imported marble cocktail table he had purchased just 3 days ago using my stolen down payment money. The impact was brutal. The heavy marble cracked a crystal vase, and DeAndre let out a sharp cry of pain. His diamond Rolex scraped harshly against the table edge as the agents pinned him down and locked heavy steel cuffs around his wrists. Brittany watched her husband get tackled and lost whatever fragile grip she had left on reality. She collapsed to her knees, her pristine white designer dress pooling around her on the floor. She began sobbing hysterically loud cries that echoed through the horrified room. She reached her hands out toward Patricia, begging for her mother to fix the situation, begging to be saved from the consequences of her own horrific greed. Patricia lunged forward to shield her daughter, but an agent firmly blocked her path, ordering her to step back immediately or face obstruction charges. Patricia froze, tears streaming down her face as she realized her absolute powerlessness. A female federal agent stepped forward, firmly grabbing Brittany by the arms and pulling her back to her feet. "You cannot do this," Brittany wailed, her flawless makeup running down her face in dark, messy streaks. "I am an influencer. I own a cosmetics company. This is a mistake. My sister did this. She is framing me." The agent ignored her frantic pleas, cleanly securing the metal handcuffs around Brittany's wrists. The sharp click of the locking mechanism was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The golden child was officially in federal custody. I stood perfectly still among the crowd of horrified onlookers, watching the culmination of my strategic planning unfold exactly as I had envisioned. The stolen money, the arrogant taunts, and the cruel eviction had all led them directly into this inescapable federal trap. They had wanted to humiliate me in front of the upper crust, but instead they had guaranteed their own spectacular public demise. The wealthy guests pulled out their smartphones, rapidly recording the arrests of the fraudulent couple. Their entire world was burning down right in front of them, and I did not feel a single drop of pity for any of them here tonight. The glittering illusion of my mother's mansion vanished in the rearview mirror as I drove back to the city. I did not need to be present in the federal holding facility to know how their night unfolded. Agent Harrison gave me a detailed briefing the next morning. Transitioning from sipping champagne in a foyer to sitting handcuffed in a windowless concrete room was a shock neither Brittany nor DeAndre could handle. The federal building was sterile, freezing cold, and indifferent to their status. There were no friends to impress here. There were only steel tables, bolted chairs, and the crushing weight of the justice system bearing down on them. DeAndre was placed in interview room A. His custom velvet tuxedo jacket was wrinkled, and the arrogant smirk he wore like a second skin had been entirely wiped away. Agent Harrison sat across from him and laid out the reality of his situation with surgical precision. Harrison did not raise his voice. He simply placed a printed copy of the federal sentencing guidelines on the metal table. He outlined the consecutive mandatory minimums for identity theft, the penalties for wire fraud, and enhancements for laundering federal funds. Harrison informed DeAndre that he was staring down the barrel of 15 to 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. DeAndre broke in less than 3 minutes. The man who spent his entire life pretending to be a fearless titan of industry crumbled the moment he faced actual consequences. He did not ask for a lawyer. He immediately started talking desperate to save himself at the expense of everyone else. He threw his wife under the bus without a second of hesitation. DeAndre told the federal agents that the entire identity theft scheme was not his idea. He claimed he was just a struggling agent and that Brittany was the mastermind who suggested stealing my social security number. He eagerly confessed that Brittany physically forged my signature on the Small Business Administration documents. He even offered to testify against her in open court if it meant reducing his sentence. He did not stop there. DeAndre turned his betrayal toward my mother. He told Harrison that Patricia was fully aware of the initial $140,000 theft. He explicitly stated that Patricia had orchestrated the transfer from the joint account to fund the down payment for the fraudulent loan. He painted himself as a naive victim of a greedy mother and daughter duo. The loyalty he had sworn to his beautiful wife vanished the second his own freedom was threatened. 2 doors down in interview room C, Brittany was having a spectacular meltdown. The golden child was entirely stripped of her glamorous armor. Her designer white dress was stained and her makeup was smeared across her face from hours of hysterical crying. She demanded to speak to her mother. She demanded her phone to check her social media accounts. She shrieked that she was a respected cosmetics executive and that this was all a massive misunderstanding. Then Agent Harrison walked into her room and calmly played her a portion of DeAndre's recorded confession. He let Brittany listen as her husband traded her life for a plea deal. The reaction was volcanic. The perfect facade of their power couple dynamic shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Brittany screamed that DeAndre was a manipulative, broke, pathetic loser who had ruined her life. She told the agents that DeAndre was drowning in undisclosed debt and had forced her to forge the signatures because he owed money to dangerous investors. She claimed she only copied my name because she was terrified of what would happen if DeAndre's business collapsed. Just like her husband, she immediately tried to deflect all the blame. But she also turned her vicious rage toward our mother. Brittany sobbed to the agents that Patricia had pressured her to maintain an image of absolute wealth. She claimed Patricia had handed her my savings account on a silver platter, encouraging her to take the money so the family could maintain their elite status. Brittany blamed Patricia for raising her to believe she was entitled to whatever she wanted. She blamed Patricia for setting impossible standards. She blamed everyone except herself. Patricia was not arrested that night, but she was brought into the federal building for questioning regarding her role in the initial wire transfer. She was placed in a bleak holding area stripped of her diamonds, and her emerald gown forced to wear a visitor badge while surrounded by armed guards. She sat in a hard plastic chair, desperately clinging to the belief that her family would stick together. She believed her daughter and son-in-law would hold the line and protect the family legacy. Instead, Agent Harrison walked into the holding area and delivered the brutal, unvarnished truth. He informed Patricia that both Brittany and DeAndre had given full detailed confessions. He told her that they were currently in separate rooms, aggressively testifying against each other and explicitly naming Patricia as a co-conspirator in the financial crimes. The color completely drained from my mother's face. The perfect family she had built, the toxic dynamic she had nurtured and protected for decades, was completely annihilating itself. They were turning on each other like cornered rats on a sinking ship. Patricia realized in that freezing room that her golden child possessed zero loyalty. The unconditional devotion she thought she had bought by allowing them to steal my life savings was an absolute illusion. Brittany and DeAndre were tearing her legacy apart to save their own skin. Patricia sat alone, shivering in the completely sterile federal building, finally understanding the catastrophic magnitude of her own parenting. She had cast out the only daughter who actually worked hard and played by the rules, all to protect two greedy, selfish criminals who sold her out the moment the lights flashed. The arraignment took place 2 weeks later at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse in downtown Chicago. The weather outside was a bitter, biting cold, perfectly matching the atmosphere inside the polished marble corridors of the justice system. I stood near the heavy wooden doors of Courtroom 4, holding a fresh cup of coffee, waiting for the proceedings to begin. I was not required to be there. The federal prosecutors had already built an ironclad case without needing my physical testimony for this preliminary hearing, but I wanted to be there. I needed to see the final chapter of their arrogance written in stone. The hallway was bustling with sharply dressed attorneys, federal marshals, and nervous defendants. And then I saw her. Patricia walked out of the elevator, and the sight of her was genuinely shocking. The proud, haughty matriarch who had hosted elite galas just 14 days ago was completely gone. The federal government moves with ruthless efficiency when tracking laundered money. Because Patricia had willingly remortgaged her mansion to funnel cash into Apex Horizon Holdings, the feds had frozen every single one of her personal and corporate assets. Her bank accounts were locked. Her credit cards were declined. The bank had already initiated aggressive foreclosure proceedings on the townhouse. She was entirely socially ruined. The country club had quietly revoked her membership the morning after the raid. Her wealthy friends, the same people she had tried to impress with imported caviar and string quartets, had completely abandoned her. Nobody in the Chicago elite wanted their names anywhere near a massive federal fraud indictment. Patricia looked like a ghost. Her designer clothes were replaced by a plain, wrinkled trench coat. Her perfectly highlighted hair was flat and unkempt. The dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and inescapable panic. She spotted me standing silently by the courtroom doors. For a second, she froze. Then, a desperate, wild look crossed her face. She practically sprinted across the marble floor toward me. The few people in the hallway turned to watch the commotion. Patricia did not care about optics anymore. The woman who had previously valued her social image above her own daughter's well-being was now completely stripped of her pride. She stopped right in front of me, her breathing ragged, her hands shaking violently. "Natalie," she gasped, reaching out to grab my coat sleeve. I stepped back smoothly, denying her the contact. Her hands fell empty to her sides. "You have to stop this," Patricia pleaded, her voice echoing shrilly in the corridor. "You have to tell them it was all a big misunderstanding. Tell the agents you gave Brittany permission to use your information. Tell them we were just moving family money around. If you just talk to the judge, they will let her go. They will let DeAndre go. They will unfreeze my accounts. You can fix all of this right now." I looked at her with absolute unwavering ice. I did not feel a single shred of pity. I did not feel an ounce of the guilt she was desperately trying to extract from me. "You still do not understand how any of this works, do you?" I asked, my voice echoing with quiet authority. "You still think you can just manipulate your way out of reality? You think you can treat federal law the same way you treated me? You truly believe your golden child is above the law because you spent your entire life shielding her from facing a single consequence for her toxic actions." Patricia burst into loud, ugly tears. Her knees buckled. Right there in the middle of the federal courthouse hallway, the former queen of the suburban elite fell entirely to her knees. She looked up at me from the floor, her hands clasped together in a pathetic gesture of begging. "We are family, Natalie. Please. We are your family. Brittany is your little sister. She is terrified. She is sitting in a cell crying for me. You cannot do this to your own blood. I am your mother. I am begging you to drop the charges. Just drop the charges and we can go back to normal." I stared down at the woman on the floor. I let her words hang in the air, highlighting the sheer breathtaking ignorance of her request. I leaned down slightly, making sure my voice was crystal clear. "You cannot drop federal charges, Mother," I explained, delivering the brutal reality with surgical precision. "This is not a domestic dispute. I am not the one prosecuting your golden child. The United States Department of Justice is prosecuting her. The FBI does not care about our family dynamics. They care about the $1.5 million your daughter stole from the federal government. She committed massive corporate fraud and identity theft." Patricia sobbed harder, burying her face in her hands. The reality of her permanent ruin was finally penetrating her delusions. "You let them steal my life savings," I continued, standing tall and looking down at her broken form. "You kicked me out into the dark, freezing rain to protect a fraud. You told me that my sister was building an empire. You told me that she was superior to me. You told me my sister deserved everything she wanted because she was the successful one. I took a step back, preparing to leave her behind forever. I delivered the final devastating truth to the woman who failed me. Well, she finally got exactly what she deserved. You wanted her to have everything. Now she has a matching orange jumpsuit to prove it. I did not wait for a response from her sobbing mouth. I did not look back. I turned on my heel and walked away down the massive marble corridor. I left my mother kneeling on the cold floor, crying alone under the fluorescent lights, completely abandoned by the very family she had actively destroyed me to blindly protect and unconditionally serve. 6 months passed with the rapid, unstoppable momentum of a freight train. The federal justice system does not operate on emotion, family ties, or manipulative tears. It operates on hard facts, indisputable evidence, and rigid statutes. The final sentencing hearing took place on a bright Tuesday morning in late spring. I sat in the gallery of the courtroom, flanked by Gavin and Agent Harrison, watching the absolute final chapter of my family's destruction. DeAndre stood before the federal judge wearing a shapeless tan jumpsuit. He looked drastically thinner, completely stripped of his velvet tuxedos, his leased sports cars, and his diamond watches. Despite his eager cooperation with the authorities and his desperate attempts to secure a plea deal, the sheer scale of his financial crimes caught up with him. His history of fraudulent business practices and the audacity of stealing from a federal program left the judge with zero sympathy. DeAndre was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. There is no early parole in the federal system. He would serve every single day of that sentence behind concrete walls. As the armed bailiff led him away in heavy iron chains, DeAndre kept his head down. He did not look back at the gallery. His arrogant swagger was permanently erased. Brittany was called next. My sister, the former golden child and self-proclaimed beauty mogul, looked utterly unrecognizable. Her hair had lost its expensive shine. Her skin was pale and drawn, and her posture was completely defeated. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she was a naive victim, manipulated by her older, controlling husband. But the judge had read the transcripts of the audio recordings and the text messages. The judge explicitly noted her utter lack of remorse, her vicious entitlement, and her active, enthusiastic participation in the identity theft. Brittany was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. When the harsh sentence was read aloud to the quiet courtroom, she let out a loud, broken sob. She turned her head, her eyes desperately searching the gallery rows for our mother, seeking one last ounce of protection from the woman who had always shielded her from consequences. But Patricia was not there. My mother could not afford the daily parking fee at the downtown federal courthouse, let alone the devastating emotional toll of watching her favorite daughter be hauled off to a prison cell. Patricia's reality had become a waking nightmare. The federal government and the commercial banks had completely dismantled her life piece by piece. Because she had actively remortgaged her home to funnel cash into DeAndre's fake shell company, the bank seized the mansion the moment the massive fraud was exposed. Her assets were frozen by federal investigators, and she was forced into a total, humiliating bankruptcy. The wealthy elite friends she had spent decades trying to impress dropped her instantly. When your name is associated with a massive federal indictment and public arrests, high society doors slam shut and lock permanently. Patricia was evicted from the luxurious suburban estate and forced to move into a tiny run-down one-bedroom apartment on the far industrial outskirts of the city. With no savings, no liquid assets, and no successful son-in-law to fund her lavish lifestyle, she had to join the workforce at 60 years old. I heard through the investigative grapevine that she eventually found a job working as a cashier at a local discount grocery store. The woman who used to sip expensive wine, wear emerald gowns, and look down on everyone who did not meet her impossible standards was now spending 8 hours a day scanning barcodes and bagging canned goods for minimum wage. She was entirely alone. She had sacrificed her eldest daughter to protect a mirage, and the mirage had evaporated, leaving her with absolutely nothing but the crushing weight of her own terrible choices. As for me, The justice system worked exactly as it was designed to work for victims of financial crimes. Through the aggressive federal asset forfeiture process, the authorities seized the remaining funds in the shell company and liquidated the physical assets DeAndre and Brittany had purchased. My stolen $140,000 was fully restored and wired back into my secure individual account. But the restoration of my hard-earned savings was only a fraction of my overall victory. Handling the most complex high-stakes financial fraud case in the history of our firm did not go unnoticed by the senior executive partners. Gavin personally recommended me for a top-level leadership position, citing my flawless execution, my calm under extreme pressure, and my brilliant tactical strategy. A month after the arrests, I was officially promoted to Director of Fraud Investigation. The promotion came with a massive salary increase, generous profit sharing, and an entire dedicated team of junior forensic analysts working under my direct supervision. My career, the very thing my mother had venomously threatened to destroy, had skyrocketed to an elite level. I took my restored savings, combined it with my new executive signing bonus, and bought exactly what I had always wanted. I did not buy a house in the suburbs. I bought a spectacular luxury penthouse apartment on the 35th floor of a sleek, modern high-rise right in the heart of downtown Chicago. I stood on my expansive private balcony, holding a glass of vintage champagne. The evening air was warm, a sharp, beautiful contrast to the freezing, rainy night I had been thrown out onto the street with nothing but a suitcase. The sprawling, glittering skyline of Chicago stretched out before me, a sea of infinite lights and limitless possibilities. I took a slow sip of the champagne and leaned against the thick glass railing. I did not feel any lingering bitterness. I did not feel any sorrow for the toxic family I had left behind. They had dug their own graves with the shovels of their arrogance, their greed, and their extreme entitlement. I looked down at the bustling, vibrant city below, feeling the cool breeze wash over my face. I had survived their emotional abuse. I had survived their calculated financial betrayal. I had taken their worst, most vicious attacks and transformed them into the unshakable foundation of my absolute triumph. I was 33 years old. I was the youngest executive director in my firm. I was completely unapologetically independent. I was wealthy beyond my original dreams. But most importantly, as I stood looking out over the world, I had conquered. I was beautifully, permanently free. The story of Natalie serves as a powerful reminder that blood relations do not excuse toxic behavior or financial abuse. In many families, the dynamic of the golden child and the scapegoat creates an environment where boundaries are completely ignored and basic respect is discarded. Natalie spent her life doing everything right, yet she was penalized simply because she did not fit the superficial image her mother valued. Her journey teaches us that true independence often requires walking away from the people who are supposed to protect us. When her mother and sister crossed the line from emotional manipulation to outright criminal fraud, Natalie did not respond with chaotic anger. She responded with calculated precision and absolute self-respect. She realized that trying to win the approval of people who inherently disrespect you is a losing game. The most profound lesson here is that your worth is never defined by how toxic family members treat you. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep your family warm. Setting firm boundaries and walking away from abuse is not an act of betrayal. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Natalie reclaimed her power by relying on her own skills, her own intelligence, and her unwavering demand for justice. She allowed the natural consequences of her family's extreme greed to run their course, proving that the truth always prevails over a carefully constructed lie. We must all learn to protect our peace, defend our hard-earned assets, and refuse to be reduced to collateral damage in someone else's selfish narrative. Healing begins the moment you decide you deserve better. If you found value in this story of reclaiming your power, please share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button, and subscribe to our channel for more empowering content.